Good morning, my friends. How are you today? Welcome to Get Ready With Me and Talk About Stuff. My name is Stephanie, and I'm very, very glad you're here. So, how are you? It is so bloody hot where I am, and the day is only just getting started. I'm in northern Michigan, and I'm not accustomed to like severe heat this time of year. This is like late July, early August weather. And I know there are people out there who are like, we'll just try living in the South. You know what? Try living in the North during winter, then we'll talk. I just had to throw that out there because every time I complain about the heat, somebody has to speak up and say something like that. No, we're not doing that here. If you're hot, which I'm always hot, it doesn't matter if you've never lived in the South. Your sweaty underboob does not care. Okay. Anyway, now that we've got that out of the way, how are you? Today's topic is, I don't really have notes prepared and stuff like I normally do, because today's topic is something that is it's personal to me. And rather than writing out a lot of notes about it, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to speak from the heart. And I really believe that sharing the things I'm going to share will help some people. And it will help them process some of their own stuff. Let's just put it that way. Anyway, so to get started, before I do that though, if you enjoy my stuff and you're not a subscriber, please subscribe, because that's just the right thing to do. If you're with me every week and you're enjoying my stuff, it would be really great if you subscribed. Secondly, if you would like to contribute to future content for Get Ready With Me and Talk About Stuff, there are links in the description that will allow you to do that. All right, now that we have that out of the way, all those housekeeping procedures done, let's get into it. So, last night, I finally finished the series finale of Pose. And you know, that show always leaves me with a lot of emotions to process. I first started watching the show, I binge watched it like last year when I first became aware of this wonderful goodness that is Pose. And the further I got into the series, the more there was to process. During the time period that Pose takes place, which is like mid-80s to late 90s, it coincides with the rise of the AIDS epidemic, which also coincides with the time in my life when I was at my most evangelical. And as I watched the series and I saw the lives, you know, the stories of these people's lives unfold, I grew to love the characters very much. Even Electra, which I think anybody who's watched the show knows, Electra was very hard to love at first. When we first meet her, she is just not somebody that when you think of people that you would have a strong affection for, she's probably not somebody that would come to mind. But by the end of the series, I really loved her. And as I learned these stories, understanding that they were representative of real experiences that people had as individuals and that the LGBTQ community had back at that time, even though that's not what they were known as at the time, it really made me stop and think about the fact that a community I was part of and felt relatively safe being part of, meaning the evangelical community, really worked hard to actively harm the people in the show, or the people being represented in the show. And I really have had to process a lot of anger, a lot of sadness, some shame, some guilt, because I was part of a culture and a community that contributed to the suffering discussed on the show. Specifically, I remember when the AIDS epidemic was at its very worst. I remember my church and many Christian communities, probably all over the world, not just the United States, but specifically in the United States. I remember various Christian entities and organizations saying essentially that nothing should be done about the AIDS epidemic because it was an epidemic that primarily impacted gay men, and what they were experiencing was the due penalty for their sin, and it wasn't our place to interfere with God's judgment. There were a multitude of ways that was stated, sometimes to soften it and make it more palatable, but always in an effort to dismiss the experiences they quote the quote gays, the gays, were having, basically saying it is their own fault, this is what they deserve. And back in the day, I was part of that. I might have, full disclosure, there might have even been a time when I said something like that myself, because the community that I was raised in believed that, and still believes to this day, that homosexuality was a sin that apparently far exceeded in, the horrific nature of sin. It was worse than just about anything else. That was the attitude that was very prevalent in the circles I traveled. So when I'm watching Pose and realizing that my church and the belief system that I supported contributed to harm for a lot of people. And not just a little bit of harm, it was deadly harm. It was harm that killed thousands, because by ignoring the AIDS epidemic until it became clear that yes, straight people can contract it too, and we can it can be contracted even without sex. You could get it through a blood transfusion. Until that was evident, my community was very happy to let the gays in their community die, and die horrific deaths. When I learned about what AIDS does to a person, it wasn't stated with, these things were not shared with a measure of compassion. They were shared with a see what happens when God's judgment finally falls down on a person's life because he's had enough of your filthy sinfulness. Do you see this? This is what God thinks of your sin. And that was the awareness I had of AIDS at the time and the people who were dying from it. So fast forward till I'm in my in my 40s, to be honest. And you'll understand why I giggled a little bit in just a second there. Well, actually, let's back up a little bit. So all this is going on, okay? And at the same time, I'm fully aware, even though I don't understand all the reasons, I'm fully aware that I am not what I was consistently told I needed to be considered a, quote, godly woman. And I knew when I was little, that whatever I needed to be to become this, quote, godly woman that I was being told I should be, I was not that. When I was little, and I'm talking, 4, 5, 6 years old, I mean little, when I would be in church, for example, and they would call, they'd say the girls need to go with such and such a teacher for Sunday school or whatever, I would, without question, have a moment of uncertainty if that meant me. because I didn't feel like one of the girls. I didn't feel like I was a girl. I didn't feel like I was a boy, but I also didn't feel like I was a girl. So there was always that question of, okay, if the girls are supposed to be going with this teacher for this purpose, does that include me? Because I don't think I'm a girl. But because I knew it was expected of me, I would follow along, and if I didn't, I would hear, Stephanie, come on, the girls have to go, blah, blah, blah. And I just went along with it. And that was a very common experience in my life early on. And that stayed with me for a very long time. And it's still with me to this day. But I remember as a teenager trying so hard to be what I was told I needed to be. I tried very hard to be more feminine. I tried very hard to even want the things that I was told I was supposed to want. I tried to want the husband and the family and, the opportunity to live a life of ministry and so forth. Because that's what I was told I should do, because that would please God. And as a woman, that was like my calling. My job was to be pleasing to God and to marry a godly man and make babies and raise them in a godly way. And I tried really, really hard to even want to do that. Tried hard to such a degree that as I got older, I made all kinds of terrible choices for myself, trying to fulfill this role of being the kind of woman, the kind of person that, I tried to make choices in my relationships that I thought, even though I wasn't necessarily happy with them, I thought it would get me closer to the goal of being the kind of person I was told I needed to be. If you've never been in specifically the American white evangelical culture, if that was never something you were immersed in, this might all sound really, really strange to you. Like, what do you mean people were telling you what you needed to be? Nobody gets to decide that for you. You get to decide for yourself. But that's not really the case in the American white evangelical community. There are very clear expectations for girls and women. In some degree, there are for the boys and the men too, but girls and women, the expectations placed on us were that we would basically surrender a good part of our autonomy and our humanity for the sake of being this, fulfilling this very nebulous idea of what a godly woman should be, a biblical womanhood. What does that mean to live in biblical womanhood? What does that look like, etc. Those things were, even though every woman was different, the expectations were the same, that she was going to be submissive, that she was going to keep herself sexually pure until marriage, that she was, the girls were going to be growing up thinking of little else other than meeting a godly man, marrying him and having a family with him, and if you were really super lucky, being called into ministry with him. So to deviate from that, because that expectation was made very clear, to deviate from that, it not only came with a price, but part of the price that you paid was tremendous confusion. This would become very obvious to me as I got older, and I began to realize I did not desire a lot of the things I was told I should and would desire. I went to Bible college, and I remember the joke in the church bulletin was that I was going to get my MRS degree, because so very often young women go to Bible college, and by the time they're done with Bible college, they're engaged, if not married. And I remember thinking, but I don't even have a desire to meet someone and get married. I don't desire to be, a wife and a mother. So I was confused already, and this was in my early 20s. And the confusion was already there and had been since I was little, but it was compounded significantly as I got older, and the expectations became more clear that, as I aged, it was expected that finding a man and getting married and having a family was going to be a priority. That was very evidently, it was very evident that this was something that people thought every young person who presents as a woman should want. But I never did. Now, that's not to say I never had crushes. I had lots of crushes. But the interesting thing was, my crushes were never on people that were actually attainable to me. They were on people that, they were on guys that I knew I had no chance with. They were guys who were older. They were guys who ran with a different crowd. They were guys who were accomplished, and I certainly was not. And even though it hurt when the rejection eventually came, looking back on it, I think that the objects of my affections were always people I knew I could safely feel that way for, because it was never going to work. And the idea of it ever working terrified me, honestly. I not only didn't feel like a girl, I didn't feel like whatever I was something anybody could desire. When I reached my 30s, after a bout with cancer and desperately wanting things to go back to whatever passed for normal, I did get married to a man. And this was somebody that I knew was a problem. I knew he was not good for me. I knew that it was a mistake, basically. Before I even said I do, I knew it was a mistake. What I was desperately reaching for, though, was this ideal. I thought, maybe if I get married, I can finally feel comfortable because I'm finally doing what they've told me all along I should do. Marry someone who, by all appearances, seemed godly, or at least godly enough, and have a family, and maybe then I can feel at peace. Because up to that point, and I was 32 when I got married, up to that point, peace had been elusive. I suffered with depression most of my life. I don't remember a time as a child when I did not feel depressed. I don't remember a time as a child when I didn't think, at least however fleetingly, of ending my life. I don't remember a time when those thoughts weren't there. I do remember that at a very young age, I asked my mother why she didn't have an abortion instead of giving birth to me, which of course was shocking for my mother to hear. There was just no peace. There was no sense of well-being. And I thought, well, all these questions are swirling around in my head about who I am, about what I am, about where my attractions are. If I get married and start a family, maybe I can lay those things to rest. Maybe that is what it's going to take for me to finally feel at peace. That was not to be the case. It became very evident not long into the marriage that I had made a terrible mistake. And I knew that going in. Like, that was not a surprise to me. I mean, I remember the night before I got married. He was at his place. I was at what would become our place. And I remember thinking, I could just call it off now. You know, I could just tell him I don't want to do this. He's going to be mad. And he's going to call me names and stuff. But I could just not marry him. But I didn't want to let him down. I didn't want to... I didn't want to let people down. Is really what it came down to. So I went through with the wedding. We got married. Not long after, I was pregnant. Not long after that, I left. Went through my pregnancy alone. I saw him two final times after I left, and that was it. We never saw each other again. He never met his son by his choice, because he could have. And then he passed away when my son was about 3. And to the surprise of no one, I still had no peace. As my son's getting older, I'm beginning to realize things about myself. When I was 43 years old, I finally accepted that I am not straight. I am bisexual. I am attracted to all different kinds of people. I finally came to grips with that because I had people in my life who were very openly discussing these things and very openly talking about how growing up evangelical really robbed them of the opportunity to explore that part of themselves. You know, even though they knew they weren't what they were told they needed to be, they were never given the language to explore what they were. And that resonated with me so clearly, and it still does today. You know, somebody who's not exposed to the culture wouldn't understand it. You know, it doesn't make sense that it would take 43 years for me to understand that I'm bisexual, and that I sometimes like women more than others. Sometimes I like men more than others. Sometimes I'm attracted to people who don't fit the gender norms at all, more than those who do. You know, why did it take me 43 years to figure that out? Well, think about this. I grew up in a culture that said being anything but cisgender and heterosexual was sin. And not only was it sin, but it was sin worthy of horrific punishment, such as the punishment that came through dying from AIDS-related complications. So growing up hearing that, the idea that I was anything but straight and heterosexual was something I couldn't dwell on it, because there was nothing I could do. You know, it wouldn't have, the only thing that would have happened if I had had this realization at a much earlier age is there would have been an attempt to, quote, fix me, because I would have been considered broken. I would have been considered living in a state of sinfulness. Even if I didn't act on anything, it was enough just to have the inclination. So had I had these realizations earlier in life, it probably would not have ended well for me. I think that the struggle would have been much harder. However, having said that, I also understand that because I had these realizations later in life, I'm almost 46. It's not like I'm like in my sunset years or anything. You know, I really wasn't given a chance to explore all that I am. I tried so hard for so long to fit into the mold of what I thought I needed to be, that who I really am was not something I ever was able to fully explore. As an adult, I'm seeing that this matters a lot. I'm seeing that because I was not given those opportunities to fully explore things, there are things I felt I missed out on. You know, now I have a kid. I've got obligations in my life that make it more difficult to safely and reasonably explore things that I might have been able to do prior to being a parent. I'm in a situation where, I am still very close to my deeply evangelical family, because as a single mother, I need the help. I'm not in a position where I can just pack up and move away so I can explore life as a bisexual. It's not a situation that I'm in. So having these realizations later in life, even though they protected me from some things, it was, and I think anybody who's ever had to accept these things about themselves and eventually come out in some way understands that the closet that we live in, even though it's miserable in there, depending on what community you're part of, that closet can also protect you for a time until you are able to safely come out and live your full life on your own terms. That closet might be the safest place for someone for a while. And I think that was the case with me. As much as I would love to say, it would have been awesome if I had had the opportunity to live my life as fully out as I wanted to. The reality is, even at 33 years old, I'm not in a position where I can do that. At 33, how about 45? Getting my timelines mixed up here. And so I'm left with that question, what do I do? Well, first, I think it's important to mourn that, and to acknowledge that there were things that were taken from me by not being able to fully live my truth. And here's the thing too. Anybody who's known me for any number of years, the few people that I have come out to, they weren't surprised at all. I remember even as a teenager, my best friend at the time gave me a book. Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. And the book is about a young woman who's beginning to realize that she is not straight. And she's from a very conservative family in which it would not be safe for her to come right out and say that. And so my best friend at the time was trying to tell me, Stephanie, you're not straight. I know you want to think you are, but you're not. But I was not ready to hear that. So at 43, I finally understood what people had been trying to tell me over the years, and I shared that understanding with a few key people in my life, and they were like, yeah, Stephanie, we already knew that. It wasn't like it was a surprise, because over the years people had asked me in a multitude of ways, are you a lesbian? Or, do you, are you attracted to people other than men? People had picked up on it long before I was ready to see it. So it wasn't really a surprise to anybody when I revealed this information about myself. But I'm still, like I said, in a position where I cannot, in an entirely safe manner, say these things out loud. Now, obviously, there are people who know me and know my family and may very well have outed me already. I don't know. It's possible. And if my family does know, especially my parents, they've not said anything, which would surprise me, because my parents were very active when I was a child, a teenager, in harming the community that I am now part of, and really kind of always have been, even though I was in the closet. So to feel safe saying these things to them is not something I'm experiencing, and if they are aware and they're just not saying anything, I'm honestly shocked. Why am I sharing all of this? I'm sharing all of this in part because, having watched the whole series Pose, and realizing the part I played, however unknowingly, in marginalizing people who were already they just wanted to live their lives. You know, they just wanted to live their lives. They wanted to thrive in their communities. They wanted to thrive outside. I mean, they just wanted to live like anybody else does. And I was part of a culture that said, no, you don't deserve to do that because of who you love or because of how you identify. I'm seeing the fruit of that, of those seeds planted in my own life. Online, I'm frequently misgendered as a way to insult me. I've been called it, you know. Somebody said something to me about my post for Mother's Day on Twitter, in which I said, I think Mothering Day would be a good idea because there are a lot of people who do mothering and they are not biological mothers and never will be, but they are mothers nonetheless. And somebody, you know, in an attempt to hurt my feelings or something, wished me a happy Mother's Day, and somebody said, I don't think it's reproduced. It probably has animals that it refers to as its children. And that's happened a few times. You know, if I'm not misgendered by people who dislike me, I'm called an it. So these things that I'm experiencing now, and that so many others are experiencing, and worse things that people are experiencing, are the fruit of the seeds that I helped plant decades ago. You wonder why so many transgender women, specifically transgender women of color, are so vulnerable and so unsafe. It's because of things I helped make happen. With my voice, with my votes, with just my general way of existing in the world at the time, I helped create an unsafe place for the LGBTQ community, specifically transgender people. And I have to own that. And I also have to acknowledge that the difficulties I'm having now with not being able to fully live out loud and speak my truth with my family and with everyone is a direct result of things that I did when I was much younger. Now, does that mean I need to carry around guilt and shame? No. What it does mean, though, is I need to take ownership of it, which I have. I need to make amends where I can. And I think I also have an obligation to share my experiences, because there are people out there, maybe people who are watching this video right now, who grew up just like I did, and maybe are still feeling like there's something wrong with them because they don't fit the mold that people tried to put them in. And I'm here to tell those people, there is nothing wrong with you. You are valid just as you are. And I think especially during Pride Month, there is so much pressure to come out. There is so much pressure to speak the truth, speak this truth and own it publicly, and, let the chips fall where they may. The reality is it's not safe for every person to come out. The reality is that we are still living in a world, which I helped create, in which people, especially kids, youths, who come out might have a seriously heavy price to pay. They might be kicked out of their homes. They might lose their jobs, even though that, that's supposed to be illegal. It still happens. They could lose, if there's somebody who is involved in the church, they could lose their community. And as somebody who walked away from church voluntarily, I can tell you that even though the community is toxic a lot of the time, if that's all you know, if that's the only network of support you have, losing that, even if it's for good reasons, is incredibly painful. And it really is bewildering to try to exist in the world without that network until you've had time to build something new. It really is and not an altogether pleasant experience to find yourself without that network of support that you're accustomed to having. So there are reasons, valid reasons, why people choose to stay in the closet. And I don't think during Pride Month or any time it's anyone's business to pressure them to come out. If you are safer in the closet because of the circumstances of your life, that does not in any way invalidate that you don't fit the mold of cisgender heterosexual. And it's interesting to me, especially as a bisexual person, the only people, we don't ask for validation from, we don't ask people to validate their straightness by showing us how very straight they are. We don't ask them to do that. Why should we ask each other, why should we ask that of each other? Why should we, as a community, tell people that their sexuality is not valid unless they're out of the closet? It's not right, and it causes a lot of harm. And especially as a bisexual, I feel constantly like the community I should be a part of doesn't see me as valid because I'm not, quote, gay enough, or I can be in a straight presenting relationship, which gives the illusion that I'm more safe, etc. It's very strange to me that expecting people to validate themselves in this way to please your definition of what constitutes LGBTQ is the exact opposite of what we should be doing to support and encourage each other and provide people with community who otherwise might not have it. I think that we can and should do better. And my hope is that as more people tell their stories, yeah, I'm bisexual. That doesn't mean I haven't struggled. It doesn't mean that, and also it doesn't, just because I present very often as, in a feminine way, that doesn't mean that I am not non-binary. That doesn't mean that just because I occasionally, I use the term she or call myself a woman, that doesn't mean that I necessarily feel comfortable doing so. That is just the easiest route for me. I don't want to have to explain myself to people again and again and again, so I will default to the easiest thing that allows me to navigate this world. But from the time I was a child, I have never felt like a girl. I don't always feel like a woman. Pregnancy was bewildering for me because I couldn't, because my body was doing something that was very much what is considered a standard for women. And it felt strange to me because I don't always feel like a woman. And the gatekeeping on people's identities really needs to end. We need to stop, we need to collectively stop telling people that you have to present in this way to be considered non-binary. You have to wear gender neutral clothing. You have to use gender neutral pronouns. You have to style your hair in such a way that you could be perceived as either or, not both and. I don't know. It's weird the way there's so much gatekeeping in this community. And what is so heart-wrenching for those of us who grew up in a culture where we were constantly told what we're supposed to be and told we were flawed if we couldn't be that, is to find that sort of, to find that experience again in a community that should be accepting and should understand very well that gatekeeping is harmful. To find that again there, it's very isolating. And I know a lot of bisexuals feel that. They've gone to pride events and been told flat out they don't belong there, especially if they are currently in a straight presenting relationship. As an individual, it has been hard to find my place. In many ways, I am very closeted still because I don't feel entirely safe, and I have to be okay with that. Sorry, I just kind of lost my thoughts because I've got a lot going on in my head right now. But, you know, watching Pose and knowing that at the time those events were taking place was a time when I was planting the seeds for what is now happening in my own life today. And it's not just happening to me as an individual, it's happening because I helped create a culture that made it okay to find different ways to punish people for who they are. It's a bitter twist of irony, really. And it makes me more mindful of the impact of the things that we do today. What impact will they have a generation from now? And that impact can be for good or bad. In the case of the things that my community was doing back in the 80s and 90s, I would say that the fruit coming from that is not very good, because I know of many people who left the evangelical world and came out after, and they have been completely disowned by their families. They have been forced into homelessness. They have been dead named. They have been intentionally misgendered. They have been told that their sexuality is an abomination, and if they don't get right with God, that they're going to burn in hell for all of eternity. It doesn't matter that so many of the clobber verses used are taken out of context. It doesn't matter that there are valid interpretations of those clobber verses that says, no, these verses do not mean what you think they mean, and you need to stop using them to harm people. None of that matters to these people, to these people's families. What matters is my community at the time spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money convincing people that people were dying of AIDS because that was God's judgment, and even though it was harsh, it was deserved. And the fruit of that is families are more than willing to turn their backs on their own children. And in some cases, even if that means not seeing their grandchildren or whatever, because they believed these hateful lies that I helped perpetuate. So it's been an experience, and I'm still processing it. But what I know for sure is I don't have anything to prove to anybody. I know who I am, and I know I am not straight. I know I'm bisexual. I know I'm not cisgender. I never have been, and I have never felt like I was. That has been my truth from the time I was a very small child, and it's true whether I say it out loud or not. So for the people who are stuck in a closet, know that your truth is valid even if you can't say it out loud, and you don't have anything to prove to anybody. If you're feeling pressure to enter into an unsafe situation just to be able to say you came out, understand nobody who you might be feeling pressure from has to live with the consequences of that, but you do. So if it is safer for you to remain in the closet and be comfortable knowing your own truth and knowing that maybe for now you are the only one who knows that, there's nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with choosing your own safety. And any pressure to jeopardize yourself in any way just to be able to say you came out is coming from people who do not have good intentions for you, who just want another tally mark on their virtue signaling sheet that they helped somebody come out of the closet even before they were ready to. Those are not people who you should defer to. Trust your own instincts, and if you know it is not safe to come out, then you don't have to do it. It's enough to know your own truth, and believe me, you are not the only one who is closeted. There are people who live for years out in some aspects of their life and closeted in others. I think that's actually a pretty normal thing. Whether it should be or not is an entirely different conversation, but that, you're not alone in that. I'm going to finish this up. I will be right back with some final thoughts, and I hope you'll stick around. I'll be right back. All right, I am back with another cheap wig. I love cheap wigs, and I will not ever apologize for that. It's just part of who I am. Anyway, so I'm wearing all these colors because I want you to know Pride is for you too. Some of us cannot openly celebrate as much as we might like to. Some of us can't celebrate at all. That's okay. That does not mean that Pride is not for you. It just means it might not be safe for you to openly acknowledge it, but you have every right to feel proud of who you are, to count yourself as part of the community, and to find peace within your heart, peace within yourself, to know that you're valid. Even though I can't live as openly and out loud as I would like to, I have to tell you that since I finally accepted that I am not straight and I am not heterosexual, or I'm not straight or heterosexual, and I'm also lady redundant woman. I'm not cisgender. It has been so liberating to accept that about myself, to understand that I don't have to try to fit into that mold anymore. I don't have to live that lie anymore. I am who I am, and who I am is amazing. I don't have to be fixed. There's nothing wrong with me. And I can celebrate every part of who I am without any shame. I might have to celebrate quietly, or only among certain friends, but that's okay. And it's okay for you. You are valid. I am valid. Even if we have to live in a closet some of the time, that's okay. It's very freeing to know and accept who you are, and to know and accept that no one can take that from you, and that there is nothing wrong with you. You do not have to be fixed. And if you can take anything away from this video today, it is that I want you to know you're valid and you don't need fixing. There are lessons to be learned. Through watching Pose, I really had to reckon with a lot of things that I've done in the past, a lot of ideas that I helped perpetuate. And if nothing else, it really brings to mind the reality that our actions have consequences. It breaks my heart to know that I did things that hurt people who never did anything to me, who just wanted to live as fully and vibrantly as straight people do, as hetero or as cisgender people do. And they were told, no, you don't deserve that, and your life is not worth saving. And it's painful to know that I was part of that. I can't undo that. But what I can do is use what I have to make sure it doesn't happen again. I can use my voice, I can use my vote, I can use my story, I can use my platform to amplify voices that are further affirming people. Because I can't change what I did, but I can decide I'm never going to do that again. So anyway, If today was a little bit rambly, I'm sorry. Like I said, I really didn't have an outline or anything prepared because I really wanted this to come off, you know, to just speak from the heart as much as I could, to just be my true and authentic self with you, which I try to always be anyway, but having to just speak things as they come to mind and as they bubble to the surface in my heart is the most authentic way I could think of to do this. So I hope you're having a wonderful day. If this resonated with you, I would love to hear from you. Any homophobic, transphobic, you know, whatever comments will be deleted, so don't even bother. And if I have to shut down comments, I will, but I really hope I don't have to do that. I hope that people can be loving and affirming and supportive in the comments because, you know, regardless of who you are or how you identify, the reality is this: we are all in this together. We coexist with each other, even if we disagree, even if we really don't like certain things about each other, even if there are things about each other we don't understand. We are all in this together. We have to share this world, and not a single one of us is getting out of here alive. So we need to make the journey as pain-free as possible for people. And if you can't help people in their journey, for the love of God, at least don't hurt them. And if you've got time on your hands to spend spewing hate online against people you don't even know, people who have done nothing to you, they're just existing and living their lives, and you've got time to send out hateful messages just because you can, get a fucking hobby and leave people alone. All right, that's it for now. Have a great day, and be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and don't shit on yourselves or anyone else. Be proud of who you are, embrace who you are, because once you do, the freedom you're going to find, even if nothing about your life changes necessarily, the freedom you're going to find just in embracing who you are is going to feel so good. That I can promise you. It'll all be okay. It will. It will. Okay, see you.